Tūtaua mai e runga, tūtaua mai e raro, tūtaua mai e waho, tūtaua mai e roto, kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie hue tai kie. Kia ora koutou katoa, my name is Sarah McCormick. I'm part of the Communications and Engagement team for the Waitematā Harbour Connections project. Thanks for joining us all this evening for our online webinar. I'll be your facilitator for tonight, and I'll just start by saying we will be recording this session and we'll be putting parts of it on the project website for those who can't attend. As you may know, the project's out for consultation at the moment and feedback closes 1st of May. So we wanted to run this session in particular for those who couldn't attend some of our in-person events. And also if you've viewed our material and had some questions you want to ask of the project team, now is the time to do it. So I'll run through a bit of housekeeping first about how this will, and then we'll introduce you to our presenters who'll talk more about the project. So you'll see that you can't switch on your camera or microphone for the session. We've got a app called Slido, which you've hopefully seen in your email that you received, but if you didn't receive that email from us, we'll pop that into the chat now. You can hopefully see the chat bar, and if you've joined us through Teams via your browser, it's a little chat icon, little chat bubble icon, and it will say show conversation when you hover over it. So if you click on that, there'll be a message from us with the Slido link. So Slido will open up in a new window for you, and you'll be able to submit any questions you have for the team. We'll moderate those and put them to our project team members that are here online. If we don't get your question tonight or you think of something else later, feel free to use the Slido app tonight and put something else in there, and we'll be answering them tomorrow and Friday. So we'll submit a summary soon and get that out to everyone after this. Okay, so I think that's all. If you have any technical difficulties, let us know. Probably the easiest way is via Slido or send us an email. We can put that in the chat as well. We're going to get started with our presentation just to run through a bit more about the project. So I want to introduce Dave Dunlop and Tunis van Schalkwyk. They're part of our project team. They'll briefly introduce themselves, including their roles on the project, and then they'll give a rundown of our presentation, including the scenarios that are out for consultation at the moment. Over to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Dave Dunlop, taku ingoa, the Alliance Director aho. So thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that welcome and run through the housekeeping. So yeah, as I outlined in my introduction, I'm the Alliance Director, so I'm working with the team and all the partners to deliver this important project. So what I'm going to do is do the first part of the presentation and then I'll hand over to Tunis. But before I do, perhaps Tunis, if you just introduce yourself and then we can get into it.
Kia ora, thank you, Dave. Kia ora, everybody. Ko Tunis van Schalkwyk, tōku ingoa. My role on the Waitematā Harbour Connections Alliance is to oversee the development of the business case and the transport planning elements and the design of this. So I'll take you through more of the detail around the options, as Dave said, a little bit later on in the presentation. So welcome, everybody. Over to you, Dave.
Kia ora, Tunis. Thanks heaps. Okay, so let's get into it. So first up, I'm just going to give you a bit of a rundown of where we're at in the process. So many of you will be aware this project has been around for some time, but I think it's really important to note that we're looking at a complete package of improvements here in what is called an indicative business case. So that indicative business case is programmed to occur throughout this year, with a recommendation in the middle of the year as to way forward. We will then finish that business case, and a decision will be made within Wakakatahi as the core client later in 2023, early 2024. Then it will move into subsequent phases, such as the detailed business case, then the approvals process, and then detailed design. And then recently, as many of you will be aware, the government announced that there is an expectation that construction will start in 2029. So that highlights, the scale of this project does take time to prepare and get ready for. So yes, it might seem like a long time, but for a city shaping project of this nature, it really isn't that long. In terms of just a bit of introduction about the project, there's a reason why there's a need. It's not just about the now, it's all about the future. And this project is obviously anticipating that there's significant growth that's going to occur in Tamaki Makaurau. A population growth of somewhere in the order of Hamilton will occur just in the North Shore alone. It's a nationally significant project, which is really important. But probably the most important thing of these features on the slide is the fact that it's a strong partnership approach. Now, so yes, it might be a Wakakatahi project, but being delivered in partnership with Auckland Council, Auckland Transport, and our mana whenua partners. So it's a really fundamental aspect of the project. And as I mentioned earlier, it is all about delivering a multimodal solution. So it's not just about delivering a road solution or a active mode solution for walking and cycling. It's about delivering everything holistically, which is really important from a transport system and a city shaping and urban development perspective. Linked to the fact that it's to Waitematā, it's a particularly important area, both in terms of environmentally, socially, and culturally. And really, this is a key aspect of the project and the consideration of what we create in this environment and how sensitive we can be in creating it, given the importance of to Waitematā, particularly to our mana whenua partners, but actually to everyone in Aotearoa. So I'll now just touch on why we need to invest in new connections. Now, it's easy to look at the now, but this project is not just about the now. Yes, there is an immediate need, but it is actually about future generations. We don't deliver projects of this scale to just deal with the current needs. We think about the future. And in thinking about the future, we're thinking about urban development opportunities. So that's about where growth is going to happen, where it will best happen, and where it will be most advantageous in terms of outcomes for us all and for future generations. We also want to create resilient connections. So at the moment, when the bridge, the existing Harbour Bridge goes down, which it does on a regular basis because of weather events and the likes, we're all subject to significant disruption. And that's not just weather events. This is crashes, any incident that might occur. Also, we're looking at fulfilling an activity active modes gap that exists at the moment. So currently, there is no way of getting across as if you're using active modes, unless you put your bike or walk across and take the ferry. So this is a current need. Yes, we want to deliver something for the future, but it is a real current need. Another thing that's really important is about sustainable transport choices. And this relates to the delivery of the solutions, but more significantly, the carbon impacts and emissions reduction plan for future. Next thing is around freight. So again, it ties closely to creating resilient connections. There's a real overlap with freight there, but this is currently a really significant freight route, carrying something in the order of about 12,000 freight vehicles daily, and a real lifeline for not only Auckland CBD but also the Northland. And then the final point is about rapid transit connections. So we've got the success of the busway already on the North Shore. However, at the moment, that linkage does not extend over the existing harbour bridge, and it's also got a life in terms of having a certain amount of capacity within it. So we're thinking about the future and where that growth will occur, and in conjunction with the growth will be a need for greater rapid transit connections. Okay, we'll just move to the next slide now. I'm going to touch on. And it's my final slide, which is really about the engagement we undertook at the end of last year. So we did a really successful engagement exercise to just get a sense of what people wanted and what they were looking for. And as you can see from this slide, of the respondents, 88% of people said that they would catch a bus or a train across the harbour if they could. 66% said that they would actually walk or cycle across the harbour. So these are significant in terms of highlighting the importance of this from a multimodal corridor and connection. But probably more importantly is also the fact that reliability, speed and convenience were really important to people. And information they wanted to know about was things like costs and timeliness, and also the different modes and what that means for them. So hopefully you'll get some of that information out of today's presentation and the material that's been shared to date. I'll now hand over to Tunis to talk about each of the different modes that we're actually dealing with as part of the project, and then I'll jump back to me at the very end. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave. And as Dave has mentioned, we are looking here at a multimodal program that will deal with a number of aspects to improve the connections across Te Waitematā. So the three sort of broad level modes that we're looking at here is walking and cycling, or generally active modes is the first one, and how we actually provide for that, because that does not exist. The second sort of mode is how we make goods, services, freight and general traffic more efficient. And then the third mode would be how we actually make public transport provide more capacity for public transport across Te Waitematā. So there are a number of elements that we've looked into that from our active mode perspective. The key point there is just that that we want to raise here is that we are looking at how we cross Te Waitematā, but also how we improve active modes within the North Shore generally. So all our options will include the ability for a dedicated walking and cycling connection from Constellation through to the northern side of the bridge, and then how we cross the bridge. Bridge crossings, or Te Waitematā harbour crossings, are all envisaged to be either on a new bridge structure that we will link with one of the other improvements, or through reallocation of space on the existing Auckland Harbour Bridge. So that's the broad concept around the active modes that we're exploring, and we will package that together with the other improvements that I'll run you through in a moment. From a freight and goods, services and freight perspective in general, traffic perspective here, it's about the efficiency of the connection and the directness of connecting through from the North Shore through into the central motorway junction, as well as the ability to improve the existing state highway from a resilience perspective and how it deal with sea level rise, as we've mentioned here. And we're exploring here how we could separate local traffic with the more through long distance through traffic that will travel through on the state highway through to the upper parts of North Shore, Auckland, or even beyond into Te Tai Tokerau. So that's the general focus of the freight and goods and services that we explore with this particular mode. And then the third one is from a public transport perspective. Here we are looking at improving the capacity of the public transport system from the North Shore through to the city, and we're exploring that through either bridge options or through tunnel options. Now, bridge options generally follow the existing state highway, and then for the most efficient way that we can span the bridge from the North Shore, from Sulphur Point through to the city centre, as shown in the solid lines under the B lines there, as indicated on the slide. Or we have a range of tunnel options, and we're exploring there the most direct connection through the C options, or whether we support additional catchment on the rapid transit, either on the east or the west, as indicated on the A or the D option. So the A option would be exploring routes that connect, so the lower western side of the North Shore, which is Highbury Northcote, and on the eastern side, under the D options, it's sort of the Devonport Peninsula. So those are the broad concepts and options that we explore and package together into options, and to see how they, as a package and combination, will provide for the multimodal connections that we are exploring. So on the next slide, we're just generally indicating the area that we are exploring options in terms of on the left-hand side, where we've explored bridge options to cross to Waitematā, and on the right-hand side, where we explored tunnel options, whether they are for whatever mode that it's that we're particularly looking into. Now, what we then did is we are looking at 5 scenarios that we are putting forward for public consultation. And the 5 scenarios are to be viewed not as complete options in and of itself, but we want to explore the pros and cons, or what you like from what these options offer, or your concerns that you might have on what these options offer, or these scenarios offer, so that we can then consider how we actually package this together in a final option moving forward. So they are, what we're interested in is the various elements on, aspects of these options and feedback on them, rather than a direct comparison on your preference over scenario 1 over scenario 2, for instance, but what you like of that. So just to explain them first, so there are 5 scenarios. So the first scenario is a scenario where we cross to Waitematā for a freight perspective, which is the black line, in a tunnel. So the way to read these diagrams, I'll just take a pause here for a moment just to explain the legend, because it's fairly small. Perhaps on the screen you might not see that. So the black lines denote freight and general traffic infrastructure. And if it's a dashed line and shown on the screen, it means it's in a tunnel. The red lines denote rapid transit, or the light rail extension to the North Shore particularly. Again, if it's a dashed line, it's in a tunnel. And if it's a solid line, it would be on a bridge. And then the green line denotes the active mode aspect of this particular scenario. So what you see on the screen here is a scenario where we've got the road connection from Central Motorway Junction through to Akuranga in a tunnel. We've got light rail extending through to the North Shore via Takapuna and the Devonport Peninsula, also in a tunnel. And once those 2 tunnels under this scenario are enabled, it gives us the ability to then reallocate road space on the existing state highway corridor, and then put the active modes on the existing Auckland Harbour Bridge as shown there. So general benefits with the tunnel approach is that it gives us the opportunity to connect additional communities as we sort of cross between the city and the North Shore, in this case on the Devonport Peninsula. It avoids impacts on Waihitapu and other general environmental impacts. It limits that. It provides us with a range of alternatives from a resilience perspective. We've got different routes and different forms of ways to cross the harbour. That gives us that additional flexibility, and it allows for the ability to remove the viaduct in the Victoria Park viaduct in Victoria Park, of course, and give that back to general public space. From a challenging perspective here, it takes a long time to implement options, tunnel options. They are generally more expensive than bridge options, and during their construction they require higher carbon emissions to complete. And then, as I sort of alluded to, the walking and cycling connection in this case can only be delivered, because it's on reallocation of the existing harbour bridge, once we have the tunnel in place and the ability to move traffic away from the existing harbour bridge that enables us to reallocate safely space on that existing structure for active modes. So that's scenario one. If we look at scenario two, this is on the other spectrum of from the cost side. Here we are looking at providing a single structure adjacent to a single bridge adjacent to the existing Auckland Harbour Bridge that will follow the same profile as the existing harbour bridge. But on that bridge structure, we will provide active modes, rapid transit, and free traffic lanes. Now, why free traffic lanes? So we aim to balance the southbound traffic flows on this option together with the northbound traffic flows on the existing harbour bridge. So in this case, the two bridge structures will work together to provide a integrated solution, and it enables us for the opportunity and provide the opportunity to remove the movable lane barrier that's currently in operation, so that we have a consistent number of lanes all day long throughout this option. Here we will have the light rail traversing from a tunnel through the Auckland Light Rail from the Wynyard location onto a bridge structure. So it will sort of transition from a tunnel to surface and then onto a bridge to cross to Waitematā. And then it will run at surface alongside the existing state highway and then at surface into Takapuna, as shown on the red line on the diagram. So this is scenario two. And I won't run through the individual bullet points in terms of its pros and cons, but as you can see there, I guess one of the key benefits here are that it requires less carbon, it's lower cost to construct, and of course we can deliver all the modes at a similar time because the bridge enables all of those at the same time. So under scenario three, here we are exploring a combination of tunnels and bridges. In this case, we're exploring extending the light rail tunnel through the lower western part of the North Shore, so Highbury, Northcote, onto Takapuna, as shown in that red dashed line. And the intention here is to explore the ability for light rail to connect additional communities in the lower North Shore between Highbury, Northcote, and Takapuna into the system, and directly into the light rail system. So we're opening up more of those urban development opportunities in this particular case, and would also provide for an east-west movement between Highbury, Northcote, and Takapuna, where we can observe from data that we've got that there is a desire for people from the lower North Shore to study in AUT or to live or work and play in Takapuna, so to enable that combination. This is paired with a road bridge that's more direct road bridge between Sulphur Point and Central Motorway Junction that will also contain a active mode component into that. So this road bridge will have 3 lanes in each direction, and that will carry all the state highway traffic and the heavy freight on it. And the existing Auckland Harbour Bridge will still be available for local traffic to travel between the North Shore and the city centre. So that's generally scenario 3. The fourth scenario, again, is a combination, but it's a slightly different combination. Here we explore a scenario where the road tunnel remains most direct between Akaranga and Central Motorway Junction, but in a tunnel. And then that gives us the ability to provide a smaller bridge, in this case adjacent to the existing harbour bridge, with less impact on the environment than some of the previous bridge structures. And in this case, that bridge will only carry the light rail and the active modes. And then similar to the previous options, the light rail will continue alongside the existing state highway and onto Takapuna as a surface option. So the general combination here that we want to explore is the ability for a smaller structure crossing to Waitematā, and obviously the ability to stage that between tunnels and bridges. And then the last scenario is a variant of the previous scenario, so they're fairly similar in terms of their elements. The only difference here is that we explore a different landing point for the light rail and active mode bridge and make that more direct into Wynyard Point. That provides a shorter, more direct connection for both public transport and active modes to then connect through the city. Still same arrangement in terms of freight and general traffic through a tunnel, and the use of the existing harbour bridge to support the local movements. So those are the 5 scenarios, and as I mentioned, they are not options in and of itself, but it's kind of the relative pros and cons, or what you like from each of those options, or what concern you about those that we want to get the feedback on. A general comparison, though, for those 5 scenarios provided on this slide here, just compare them for against some criteria that we would be interested in as well, and provide some information on in terms of the cost implication, how they enhance the resilience of the crossing itself, the level of efficiency that they provide, in this case, the ability to separate state highway and local traffic movements, and the directness of what they provide, the opportunity that's associated with each of these options to protect and enhance Te Waitematā. So that's the ability to have less reclamation or less impact on the harbour in itself through what's been provided. The carbon emissions that each of these options create, or scenarios create, during their construction, and it provides a bit of a different differentiation around that, and it's generally around the tunnels and the bridges that will provide the differentiation there. Their ability to provide for a system that is, I guess, free from disruption from sea level rise, and the ability to manage that over time. The last 2 is just the ability, how long it takes to build. And again, tunnels generally take longer to build than bridges, and the length and the number of elements on that is sort of dictating the difference there. And then the ability to stage and sequence these options, ultimately from an affordability perspective, provide the funder, ultimate funders for this project, the ability to implement components of that and not all at the same time. So that's give a bit of insight on that. For the North Shore itself, here we are particularly interested in the ability for, especially the rapid transit / light rail component, to support movement of people on the North Shore and stimulate development along the North Shore to provide for a more quality, compact urban form. Here we're exploring a number of options. So firstly is just the role of the existing busway and the focus around providing increased capacity on the existing busway. That will be a first step regardless of the options we chose here. There will be some improvements, continual improvements on the existing busway. That will be part of the program just to keep pace with the growth and demand. But ultimately, the question that we're asking here is that the strategy we go down, keep converting the busway and retain it as buses? Or do we provide under the second option, number 2 there, for enhanced capacity on the busway by upgrading the busway from buses to light rail? And that provides additional capacity, but it also comes with the disruption associated with converting that busway over a number of years from buses to light rail in order to create that additional capacity. So that's sort of the trade-off and the consideration there. Then under 3, 4, and 5, basically the question here is we're asking is, do we keep the busway but support the busway with additional rapid transit corridor broadly on those corridors? And then where are the demands, or how do people feel they want to move and connect to the metropolitan centres, which is Tekapuna and Albany on the North Shore, and how they see the key demands and movements that they would like to do in future and where they would like to live in future on the North Shore. So either supporting it through, as shown in 3, or as we just talked about in the crossing options, support the lower North Shore either through the Birkenhead Northcote area or through the Devonport Peninsula area in terms of supporting connections, movement, and urban development. So those are a broad overview of the options. In terms of the timing of delivery, I'll hand over to Dave, who will just talk you through this.
Kia ora, Tienis, and thank you for that comprehensive summary of the different scenarios and the North Shore. In terms of timing of delivery, obviously we know that all these components are important. However, we're talking about significant investment for future generations, as I mentioned earlier. So really, what we're wanting to understand and get a public view on is the importance of these aspects. So obviously the first one that Janice has already talked to, the continued improvement of the existing busway, that is going to happen, but it's how much more we go, how much focus we put on that, and how much longer we can get out of the busway in terms of increasing the capacity and the likes. The second is about, an example is about, early delivery of walking and cycling connections, particularly between Constellation Drive and Akaranga Station. That's something that can be done early. How important is that to you and the wider public? And other aspects relate to the existing Harbour Bridge. So many of you will be aware, that at the moment we can't walk and cycle over it. Obviously, being able to reallocate space, it means we have to deliver some new highway capacity in advance before we can reallocate that space. And then the final one is about the importance of delivering light rail and how soon we need to deliver light rail to the North Shore. Now, obviously, we have a whole lot of technical people working on the project that can provide a technical perspective. However, there's more to this than just a technical perspective. It's about gauging and gaining public feedback. So that brings me really nicely onto the final slide, which is really about getting your feedback. So as a team and as a project, we're really keen to get your feedback. This is about having your chance to have a say and to influence the future of not only Tamaki Makura, but also wider Aotearoa and the importance of this project and for your future generations. So what I do is really encourage you to jump online, have a look at the information that's online, so you can either use that link on the screen, or you can go to the Wakatahi website or even do a Google search, and you'll get directly directed towards that. I will now hand over to Sarah, who will facilitate a Q&A session. And so I'd really encourage you to put your questions forward, and we will seek to answer them. We've also got some technical experts involved that will also will introduce. So I'll hand over now to Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Dave and Tunis. So we've got a couple more people online who are going to be helping us with some questions. So that's Leslie Hopkins and Rowan Dixon. Leslie's our planning and broader outcomes lead for the project, and Rowan is a carbon reduction specialist in our sustainability team, alongside Tunis and Dave. So just a reminder, we've got the Slido app, so we can put that in the chat again, and you can access that and submit your questions. We've got one which I can kick us off with. So this one is, I would like information about the various geological areas and their specific advantage or difficulties for the connection. I think I'll put that to Tunis first, and maybe Leslie can comment after.
Thanks, Sarah. I guess what I'll say to that question is, at this point in time, as Dave alluded to, we are in the indicative business case stage, so we're fairly conceptual in terms of our design and understanding of this. From a geotechnical perspective, we are drawing on previous studies and previous investigations that's been done, and when we move forward in the program that Dave sort of showed a little bit earlier in the presentation, through the next phase, which will be the detailed business case phase, is where we will do more geotechnical investigations and exploration across the harbour and along the routes that we prefer, to understand that in more detail. So at this point in time, I can't provide too much more information other than the information that has been gathered in previous phases, which I obviously don't have at hand here, but if there's anything particular of that, we can probably put a bit of a Q&A together and add it on our website later.
The one aspect I was going to just comment on is that we do have a number of technical experts that are inputting into the project, and you asked about geological areas. The one area we are we do have technical expertise assisting us as in the area of contaminated land. So there are a number of areas on the southern side of the harbour around Victoria Park, Wynyard Quarter, and then on the northern side, the previous reclamation between Oniwa and Constellation. So there are specific areas that do present some technical challenges depending on the options, and we have technical people in our team who are advising us on that. Thanks, Sarah. I'll throw it back to you.
Cool. Another question here. So how were those 5 scenarios you ran through, Tunis, derived? Where did the ideas come from? And how will the final option or way forward be selected?
Well, those scenarios were derived by building on, the last decade of work that was done on the harbour connection. So we were building on previous work in terms of generally the concepts that were there and understanding of that. But then we took into consideration the change in the strategic environment. The fact that there is now Auckland Light Rail has got more definition of what's happening on the city side, that there's been some work done on active modes that we took into consideration and packaged this all together. So that is broadly where how the options kind of originated from the previous work. And then they are aimed at asking specific questions that we would like to explore and understand with this phase is, what is the form to cross the harbour bridge versus tunnel, and the various criteria that we've provided on the slide earlier in terms of resilience and cost and carbon impact is what we've used to form and shape scenarios that we want to get feedback on. So this feedback plus further technical analysis will now help us to shape and form the way we move forward against those criteria and investment objectives that we've been set by our project partners, which is effectively how we deliver on those that we will use. So I don't know if there's anything, Dave, that you want to add to that, or Leslie, perhaps?
The only thing perhaps I could add is, obviously our partners and have a whole lot of questions they want answered. So we are out to seek to answer those questions in doing this. So that is an important factor. And in doing that, as cost is important in amongst this. So that will be certainly a consideration as we go forward. As it is with any major project. So we want to make sure we get the most outcomes. In a perfect world, the most outcomes, the least environmental impact, and obviously the most cost-effective delivery solution that answers and manages to respond to the questions that are being raised and the needs of future generations. That's probably enough. That one.
Cool. Next question. What is the long-term plan regarding light rail? Will this become the dominant mode of public transport in the future? I don't know if you want to take.
So the plan for Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, from a light rail perspective, is sort of signalled in the light rail plan. What is envisaged is the Auckland Light Rail, or the city centre to Mangere Light Rail connection that is ultimately extended through to the North Shore, to Albany and beyond. And then there's also under consideration an extension from the city centre to the west, broadly via the State Highway 16 corridor out to Westgate and potentially beyond. So that's currently on the strategic plans from a rapid transit network perspective for Auckland, as though would be those 3 lines from a rapid transit perspective. And that will work as a system with the heavy rail network we've got and the buses and busway systems, and of course the ferries. So will it become a predominant mode? It will certainly play a significant part in the rapid transit movement, on the rapid transit throughout Auckland into future. So it will be quite a significant people mover, but as part of a system with those other elements that I've just mentioned.
Great. We've got another question here. So I see most of the options add extra lanes to State Highway 1. To what extent will this induce demand for commuters and potentially worsen congestion?
Me again? So in terms of the number of additional traffic lanes that's been provided, so these scenarios are focusing on no increase in the number of traffic lanes in the peak direction. So currently what we have coming across the harbour is 5 traffic lanes in the peak direction. So once these scenarios are in place, we want to retain that, and clearly we're no aim to induce traffic because we've got an overall objective to reduce our emissions and have a more emission efficient transport system. So, but we want to balance that with the efficiency of freight movement and, of course, making it more resilient from sea level rise perspective. So, none of these options increase the number of lanes in the peak direction during the peak, but they would enable a road connection that effectively won't rely on a movable lane barrier, which of course save operational cost and emissions associated just with general that operations, but retain that in both directions. So I hope I'm clear on that answer, but happy to take a supplementary on that if that wasn't that clearly explained.
Thanks, Tuna. Sorry, there's quite a lot of transport planning questions, so the next one might be for you as well. This one's about other crossing locations. So for the resilience of the network, have other crossing locations, for example, through Devonport, been considered? So I assume that's crossing straight through to Devonport.
I don't mind giving that one a go, Janice. I think there have been a number of studies over several decades that have looked at different crossing options. They've gone to the east of the existing Auckland Harbour Bridge and to the west. So I've seen iterations that brought connections across from sort of where the general Auckland port areas and across to Devonport. Progressively, those have been eliminated, and the corridor that we're looking at now is the preferred location for a crossing. The actual form of the crossing and where it goes is what we're looking at now. So yes, there have been, but our work has started from the point that the actual location of the crossing is where we're looking at.
Cool. Thanks, Leslie. This question is sort of related, but is more about I think more the heavy rail. So may I ask why there are no options to extend the metro rail line from Waitematā to the North Shore? Wouldn't it be good just to extend the existing network? Junice?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that one. From a heavy rail, I guess it's sort of said metro rail there. We generally refer to that as heavy rail through there. The heavy rail connection will require a tunnel within the city centre. So clearly we cannot have infrastructure like that at the same level as where pedestrians move, and we need that level of segregation. The system from the harbour connection is sort of part of a joint up light rail connection, as I've mentioned. So from the work that we're doing here, we are connecting into the Auckland light rail system on the city centre side. And is with the Auckland Light Rail business case, preferred option from last year, signaled that they prefer, or that project prefers, a tunnel light rail connection into the central city. So that tunnel light rail connection effectively takes up the tunnel slot in the city centre for additional infrastructure, and therefore we're building on or making best use of that infrastructure rather than have another duplicate tunnel sitting within the central city. We don't want to disrupt the central city significantly. Think about having duplicate tunnels in there providing the same functionality. We're making best use of that infrastructure that is envisaged to be provided through that project. And of course, in doing so, we believe that under a light rail scenario, this would provide for the future long-term needs of the North Shore in terms of capacity. So it is more than capable of actually providing that capacity that's needed.
Great, thank you. This question is a bit more related to the Harbour Bridge itself. So each of these scenarios appear to, each of the scenarios open up the bottleneck of the Harbour Bridge as it stands today. However, it seems to move that bottleneck to the north and south of the bridge.
I could answer this, but Tunis has sort of already answered it in part in talking about additional lanes. But Tunis, I mean, short of discussing the lanes, I mean, this is all about future opportunities, and both in terms of the growth potential and allowing people to live in the North Shore and travel to destinations in the North Shore where there'll be employment and the likes, but also about a multimodal solution. You know, without that multimodal solution, then yes, there would be an issue, but what we're looking at is investing significantly in alternatives to the motor vehicle. Tunis, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Dave, yeah, no, I think you sort of covered that. I mean, we're not aiming to create an additional bottleneck here. What it's doing is providing that efficiency of moving or separating freight with local movement in the first instance, but also we are making best use from the way the existing motorway network is set up on either side. So at the moment, from a bridge perspective, with the movable lane barrier, there's a number of lanes available in the peak, but it reduced the number of lanes available in the counter direction in the morning. So all these options here, what these options do here in terms of that aspect is it just enables the counterflow to have a consistent number of lanes available. So we're not introducing new bottlenecks in the peak direction. The same number of lanes would still be crossing either southbound in the morning or northbound in the afternoon from the city to the North Shore or vice versa.
Thank you. A couple more I can see here. So can we have some info on the location of projected density growth to increase in the North Shore? Will it be east or west or both? Leslie?
So I don't have any specific numbers, and the team are they're looking at two aspects really. So the first is, what is the future growth that's projected without the project? So we're working closely with Auckland Council's land use teams to understand where growth is planned for, and there's a lot of work that's happening in that area that the council's involved in. The second part that we're looking at as well is, what could the future urban growth and the future urban form look like with the project in place? So the project has the ability to also change the urban form depending on which route is selected. So that those are sort of two aspects to look at. Generally, the growth that is projected at the moment is focused around existing corridors and existing growth nodes. There are some to the east and to the west, but the ones on the western side are probably larger because there is a bigger catchment on the western area. So just as a general comment, probably on the east. There will be a lot more work that the team are doing, modelling land use and looking at those two aspects in terms of where it is at the moment and where could it be in the future with the project in place. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Leslie. One for you, Rowan here. Tunnels will have a bigger carbon footprint. How many years might it take for this extra carbon footprint to break even when compared to building a bridge?
Yeah, got a. Okay, so thanks for this one. So as you've seen, we've got some fairly high level options at this time, and starting to get a better understanding of the carbon intensity of their construction and their maintenance across their life cycle. And a big part of that is the carbon of their use of the vehicles, the modes that move across them. So there's this relationship between the emissions that you spend when you construct a thing, and then the emissions that you reduce over time. So that's that sort of break even point in the question there, where you reduce emissions from the modes. It leads through mode shift and more efficient vehicles, more fuel efficient vehicles, and then towards EVs. So there's this period of time, so you spend a lot of carbon as you build the thing, and then there's this period of time of reducing emissions through the different modes. So we're getting a much better understanding of that information. We have, given the level of detail of the options at this time, it's quite early, as you appreciate, as we're seeing. So we have an understanding that tunnels are more emissions intensive than bridges, and then the types of mode shifts and the emissions reduction we're getting from the movement of vehicles, different modes, trains, cars, trucks, all the rest of it, bikes. Across the modes, we're getting a better understanding of that as we understand the options themselves. And that modeling's still underway. We don't actually have those numbers at this time to speak to the sorts of discrete emissions reductions we'll get. But yeah, it's a really good question to ask, and one that we really look forward to answering. But yeah, sorry, that's kind of the best I can offer at this time. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Ron. Anyone else, or move on to the next one? I've got a couple more here, and we're nearing the end of our time, so might just get through these last two, and then we will wrap it up. What is the top speed of light rail? People want to reach their destination in the quickest time. Do we have any comments about this? Tunis?
What I'll say to that is generally from a planning perspective, we work on the assumption of approximately 80 kilometers per hour as a top speed for light rail. Now, there are systems that could go faster, and then, of course, there are systems that slightly slower, depending on the ultimate vehicle technology that would be selected at a future stage in time. But where our planning is done on that basis. But that's needs to be sort of seen in light of the number of stops and the acceleration and deceleration around the stops. And of course, people want to get to their destination, but from a public at the quickest possible time. Yes, I agree with that. But the balance we have with any public transport project really is just to sort of have that trade-off between the fastest possible way to get from one location to the other versus the number of people we connect to a system. So it is just a bit of a trade-off in the analysis that we do with that. It's how many people can get access to the system, and then how fast and how efficient that access is that's provided to those people that actually use the system.
Great. The last one I've got here is about walking and cycling. So would the active modes be protected from wind? And if they are on the existing bridge, would they be protected from traffic noise with a barrier? Do you want to give it
another one for Tunis, but I guess I can probably cover it off. I mean, obviously, this is a level of detailed design that we will get into in subsequent phases of work. However, yes, the intent will be to create a pleasant environment and a pleasant and safe environment for walking and cycling. So that is critical. Whether we do exactly what's outlined by that question, we've got to be mindful of a whole lot of other factors, such as the visual impacts and things like that. So I can't be explicit, and I don't want to be explicit at this time, but it would certainly be a consideration, as has been the consideration for us actually the view that we need it to be on a bridge rather than a tunnel because of a number of issues around amenity, safety and things like that. So that's probably hopefully covered that off, unless Tunis, you want to add anything more to that, but yeah, no, yeah.
Follow up on that. What about if you want to take light rail and have your bike on board? Would you be able to do that? Would that be similar to what you can do on the train now? Tunis?
I'll let Tunis answer that one. I mean, because it's the work hasn't really been done to confirm that. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to sort of confirm what Dave was saying. I mean, that's something in a future operating strategy for consideration in how one would do that and what the implications with that would be. We're certainly not at this stage planning for that to be the case. And one would need to consider how that would impact the type of vehicle that you select, and of course, how you would access with your bike, especially for underground stations, for the scenarios that's got underground stations, how you would actually gain access to the underground station and the implication of infrastructure to provide for that in an efficient way. But yeah, that's sort of a future stage in terms of how one would operate. So we don't have that answer yet.
Great. I think that's all from us. So again, thank you very much for joining us, and we will do our best to summarize any other questions. Feel free to put them in the Slido link until tonight, and then we'll summarize them and get them out to everyone later in the week. And just a reminder that our survey is still live until Monday, and we'd really appreciate some more feedback. So please spread amongst your networks, friends, family, please. And with that, I'll end our session tonight. Thank you to the project team for answering all the questions, and I'll close with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, hei huahahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Goodbye.
Kia ora, everyone.